got all the technology taken care of. Yeah, exactly. Cross your finger. Like, yeah. Um, I did my walk in the rain yesterday, so I'm hoping this will all work out.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the best we can do with technology. Thanks again for doing this.
Of course.
I totally appreciate it. As I think I told you on our other call, the whole point of this is to have more stories out there for people that are either new to leadership or they want to get better at it, to go, hey, like, how do people how do they handle, and I don't have all the stories.
Sure.
So I've talking to people and like, hey, how's your world work? So the first question that I always ask people is, how did you get started with leadership? Like, going back to childhood.
Yeah.
Like, where does it start off?
Yeah. So for me, I think I'm probably more of a natural leader. And I say it that way on purpose because I don't believe that you have to be born a leader. I do think you can be made a leader. I think you can become a leader.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but I did have a natural proclivity to it, right? Probably just because I was not a trend follower, which isn't to say I never follow trends like anybody else. I'm sure I did. I had, baggy clothes when baggy was the thing, and all those kinds of things, right? I had Michael Jordan's way back in the day. But overall, though, I didn't ever feel the need to follow the crowd. It's funny. I remember there was a time in high school where we were reading The Lord of the Flies, and our teacher actually intentionally didn't show up and recorded audio for what was happening in the class, and she came in much later, right? Um, and like when I say much later, like 20 minutes late, right? Um, and it was the social experiments about kids being left to their own devices, and afterwards, and this was an honors level class, so right, so it was the good kids, right? Um, Afterwards, a small group of us were still talking to the teacher, and she had said, I don't remember how it came up, but basically, what would Ricardo do in that instance? So being trapped on deserted island, no adults. Um, and Ricardo would probably point and laugh for a little while and then go off and do his own thing. Um, and so I came to leadership more by not being a follower than it was any need for other people to follow me, which is kind of this weird. It's kind of a weird in between in my experience, is that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people want people to follow them or they want to be followers, whereas I'm content to be just going it alone.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so early on, that's just something that came to me, and so from there it just kind of stuck.
Interesting. Okay. This is why I don't script these, because
Yeah,
now I'm like, I have a whole different set of questions.
yeah.
Um, do you have siblings?
I do. I am the oldest of three sons.
Ah, okay. Okay. Yeah, there's a whole behavior pattern that oldest kids tend to follow.
Sure.
Um, and there's also behavior pattern that only children, right? Um, and so I was like, huh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Totally orthogonal
Yeah.
to software leadership, but that's interesting. So what was the first, like, official leadership thing or management thing you had going on?
So professionally,
Wherever you want to go.
yeah, sure. So I tell you what, let's go professional. So another thing that's important to my journey is that I took 10 years to complete my 4-year degree. And so
Nice.
by the time I graduated with a bachelor's degree, I had already been a car salesman. I had already been a licensed insurance agent. I had more sales experience, and sales, I think, is important specifically, but also
Yes.
just more worldly experience,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so pretty early on in my career, I led my first contract, as a software engineer. And so this was when I was at Boeing my first go round. And so Boeing, most of the work they do is on contract to government customers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I led a contract. I want to say I was maybe 2 years into my career as a software engineer. Now, there were two parts to that. One is, like I said, is I was a lot more mature than most new grads were because of all the life experience that I had.
Yep. Yep.
But two, I had really great leaders around me that acknowledged my capabilities and stood up for me leading that in lieu of being replaced by folks that maybe were more senior. So,
Very cool.
yeah,
That's a huge testament to the maturity that you got from doing all that stuff. And I love when people do that.
yeah.
You're not the first person that I've heard say some version of that. Uh, um, and like, I didn't get into tech until my early 30s,
Yeah.
and I'm self-taught,
Yeah.
because I didn't when I was in college, I avoided computers.
Sure.
I just wasn't into computers, and so I was like I used some as a word processor basically, but that was about it.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't until I had a bunch of other experience that I got into technology, and yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think sales is so valuable?
Yeah, I think there are two parts to that. So first, specifically in the role that I was in there, because we were facing government customers, um, our engineering leaders, so, tech lead in this case was the role that I had, would often directly interact with the customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having that experience of being in sales, of um, both positive and negative sometimes, right? Like it's not
Sure.
always going to be smooth sailing, prepares you for that. And it also demonstrates to leaders that are putting you in those positions that you're ready to take on those kinds of challenges, right? That
Right.
when
Right.
negative things do come up, that you're not going to panic and throw your hands up or, or cave or, do something that's inappropriate for representing the company, right?
Right.
So I think that's part of it. But then also, I think just more broadly than that specific case where you're dealing with an external customer, is unbeknownst to most people, like we're all in sales all the time. Um, and so if you're not selling a product, then you're selling yourself. If you're not selling yourself, then you're selling your team. And sometimes you are selling a product, and sometimes you're selling your company. That could be to a recruit that you're looking to bring on board. It could be to, again, like if it's your team, it could be to take on new work for your team within an organization, right? And so we're all selling all the time, and I think that experience is can be eye-opening for folks that don't understand that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Early in my tech leadership career, um, Daniel Pink released a book called Everybody Sells that you just paraphrased the whole book.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a real eye opener, and that I'd never thought about it that way before. Um, and it changed my thinking on communicating up and down the org chart, and with parallel also, with peers and customers and all that stuff. So yeah,
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 absolutely. I was just joking with my CTO yesterday that I play the game. Like people talk about it in a negative way about like the politics or just the organizational change things, right? Like I don't see it that way. I don't, when I say I play the game, it can have a negative connotation. I don't lie, but I engage
right,
in a way that like I'm trying to set my team, my company, myself up for success, not at anybody else's expense. It's not a zero-sum game, right? But at
right,
the
right,
same time, my most my most important thing in terms of the business is taking care of the business. And then the second thing is taking care of myself, right? Now, as a leader, there's actually taking care of myself becomes a third thing, right? And so the second thing becomes taking care of my team, right?
yep,
And so, but even with that, I explained to my reports, everybody within my organization, that my first duty is to the business, right? And so, just understanding that and like that informs how you play the game, right? It means that like you never want to do anything to sabotage any one of those three things,
right,
right?
right,
And so it can get a negative connotation because some people don't understand that part.
right, right. It's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up, because I read an article on Medium, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and they were talking about product management and about how product managers that are successful were, air quotes, political, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading the behaviors that he was talking about, and I'm like, and I never thought of the product management stuff that I've done as being particularly political. But then I read the description and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I talk to a lot of people to find out their problems.
Yeah.
I figure out how to solve their problems in some way, shape, or form with my team. And then I go run it by them to see if they think it will work. So I've got allies, right? And then once I think we're all in alignment, I'll go to the executives and pitch them. And when they go, hey, what do all these people think? I'm like, oh, I've already, like, they already want it. Feel free to back channel with them, right?
Right.
And that way, like, and I never thought about that in a negative way.
Right.
But for me, it was always about, I'm checking with all of the stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that we're building the right stuff. And to
Absolutely.
me, that, like, I I could never think of that as a negative thing, like I
Yep.
can't. And when I run across, folks that don't do that building of allies and that research, I'm like, you're not, it's not gonna, you're gonna have problems,
Absolutely. It is a career handicap. And that's the case whether you're a people manager or an IC, right? Is
Right.
that like one of the most important things that you can do as even a senior IC is
Mm-hmm.
champions around you, right?
Right. Right.
And so what I actually often say to folks that are at the staff or above level, and different levels vary by company, but roughly translated, the super senior ICs, right? I don't expect to see a huge difference in technical capability
Mm-hmm.
between those levels. Sure, I still do expect that maybe if you're a principal engineer, maybe you're slightly more technically capable than a senior staff that's slightly more technically capable than a staff engineer. But the thing I actually expect to be the differentiator is your ability to influence wider audiences, right? So, like, at first, you should be able to bring your team along for the journey. And then later on, you should be able to influence larger and larger audiences, right? So, again, depending on the size of your organization, that might be a group or, a business unit or whatever. But as you're growing, that's what I think is the key differentiator, even at the IC level.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. And I think, this is a little bit judgmental. Um, but I think that people who expect to just be told what to do, even if no matter how technically competent they are, right?
Yep.
Part of seniority is being able to be an independent thinker
Yep.
and bring your independent thinking to the conversation and either say, hey, I think we should build a blah, 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 because, I've been talking to people, or, there's this new technology out there that could change the game for us. But, like, there's so many possible things people can say in
Sure.
team contexts, right?
Yeah.
And when they just sit there and they don't say anything and they're not bringing that contribution, it makes it very hard in my mind to think that they're a good promotion candidate.
Absolutely. A
And
hundred
that,
percent.
yeah.
No, I totally agree with that. For ICs, I usually for software engineers specifically,
Yeah.
what I tell them is that your two key contributions. The first one is easy. Oh, you write code. Cool. Like that's
Right.
apparent, and that is
Yeah.
why you're a software engineer, right? The thing that oftentimes is lost, especially on juniors or folks that are having a hard time understanding how to get ahead, is that you are paid for your expertise, right? And so I expect you to proactively be volunteering that expertise. So if a PM comes to us with an idea here and you have a great way to solve that, or you can think of that there are terrible ways for us to address this,
Yeah.
like you should be raising those without me having to go ask for your opinion, right?
Right.
And the more senior you are, the more forward you should be about that, right?
Yep.
Now, there is a time where one of my friends likes to use the phrase where you have to shut up and color. Sometimes we're going to make business decisions that are against what you think is technically best or against the experience that you've personally had. And so, sharing your experience doesn't mean that we're always going to listen to that experience, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But being in the game is you got to be you have to be in the game to win the game,
Yep.
and avoiding the game, it's never going to get you where you want to go.
Well, I always tell people too that if you're avoiding the game, that's just one way to play the game, right?
Yeah.
You're setting yourself up for lack of success, but
Right.
you
Right.
never fully get to opt out, right?
Yeah. 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 Even if you're, even if you go off and you start your own thing,
Yeah.
you still have clients in
Hmm.
some way, shape, or form, and you have to be able to communicate with them, stakeholders, investors, whatever it happens to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, how how do you help people that are shy, introvert, social anxiety
Yeah.
to move out of that?
Yeah. So, it's funny. The world is essentially, or I should say, the Western world is essentially led by extroverts at this point, right? A lot of people actually don't believe this, but I consider myself a gregarious introvert. Um, and so left to my own devices, I'm perfectly fine to be completely alone. If you give me an internet connection or a book or whatever, you can leave me in a log cabin and I'm good to go, right? And even so, like even when I did conference circuits and things like that, like I would be completely drained at the end of it. It just takes a lot of energy out of me to do the extrovert thing.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so basically, what I always tell folks is you need to be true to yourself. You need to understand where you get your energy from. And it's okay that it is draining for you to be the extrovert, right?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, in today's society, the only way that you get ahead is by speaking up. Now, there are exceptions. You're good. You can hear exceptional cases about like, some crazy coder that can just sit in a cube all by himself and like, or herself and they're the root of the business, right? Like they're the core of it. That does happen, but that's the crazy extreme, a minority,
Right.
not
Right.
like the best way or the easiest way to success, right?
Yeah.
And so what I guess what I focus on is the benefit to them, right? And so
Yep.
if I tell you that, hell, you need to speak up more, well, why? Right? And so
Yep.
the
Yep.
answer to why is, well, listen, you have these really great ideas. Nobody's aware that you have these ideas if you don't share them. And you're never going to get credit for them if you're feeding them to somebody else because that's easier for you or something like that. Like people will take advantage of you, right? And so the way I said before, as a people manager, my order of priorities are the company, the team, and then myself. I tell my ICs, I expect them that your primary responsibility is your career. I will do
Right.
everything that I can to support you in that order of optimization, right? And so your career is still in your hands. I will help you. We can have a personal development plan. We can talk that through. I'm happy to contribute, right? But at the end of the day, nobody's going to care about your career more than you do. And so
Right. Right.
but they have to take ownership of it at the end of the day. And so what I tell them is exactly that is like, this is the unfortunate reality of the matter. I'm not going to try and convince you that it's right or that it's good or that you should have to like it, but this is where we are.
Right. Yeah. 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 No, and I think that, I think that totally makes sense. And kind of cycling back to the sales thing,
Yeah.
that's how did you get into sales?
Yeah. So really it was like I kind of fell into it, right? So I started my career, my college career as a computer science major, right? And through a series of crazy, unfortunate events, I ended up failing out of school, completely my own fault. So I want to be very clear about that. I take complete ownership for that. Um, and then I was simply looking around, casting about what's a way to make money still, right? And so car sales top performers, it's a little bit like YouTube in this. Top
Right.
performers can make really good money. Most do not, right? And so I just found local opportunities to do that. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't do it for very long. I didn't like the process. I didn't feel that it jived with who I am and who I wanted to be. And so
Right.
then I did end up moving into insurance, and that was far more comfortable for me. The thing about insurance that is great is that there are very strict rules that govern it, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's not really the case in car sales, right? Like di
Right. Yeah.
different dealerships operate under different parameters, right? Um, and so I was far more comfortable with that. It taught me some amazing lessons. So, like for example, I always tell my folks, I repeat myself ad nauseum with intent. Because this way, if somebody ever says, Ricardo, you said this, I can say, no, I didn't. I always say fill in the blank, right? And all of my people can agree with that because I repeated myself ad nauseum, right? And that's something I learned with insurance is that I always said the same thing the same way when I'm selling an auto insurance policy. So if there was ever a question about what it was that I said, like, no, I have a script. Like this is exactly what I told you was covered, what wasn't covered, how that would work, that kind of thing, right? Um, and so that's how it was really luck more than anything. And then just a desire to earn money, right? Like it was as simple as that. There
Yep.
wasn't it definitely wouldn't have been something I think I would have been voted most likely to be a salesperson coming out of high school, right?
Yeah. I think that's the part of the beauty of college is there's this reinvention possibility, and you get to build your own adventure,
Absolutely.
and be like, oh, I'm gonna go. Like when I was in college, I worked in a really high end restaurant.
Yeah,
I would not have, like, it was purely one of those happenstance things. A buddy
sure.
of mine said, hey, I need to make some more money, and this restaurant's hiring. I'm going to go apply. Do you want to go with me? And like I was his wingman, you know. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go and interview. Like I've never worked in a restaurant. And he goes, oh well, they want people with no experience. And I said, well, that would be me. Okay, great. And so we went in and interviewed. We both got hired. He didn't make the probation period, and I was still there 2 years later. And I actually don't know what I did versus what he did. Like I don't know how that filter works at all.
Sure,
But that was, I learned a ton about really good leadership there, because the guy that was the GM, first of all, they had a really good coaching culture. Everybody got coached,
yeah,
basically from the top down, all the time. And if you had a better idea and you were the bottom of the ladder, you could propose it, and they would let you test it and see how it worked out. And so it was a really good power dynamic.
sure. Sounds like
Nobody.
they're doing better than a lot of software organizations.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And when I got into the software world, I brought that with me, and I'm
Sure,
like, okay, how do I, how do I abstract restaurant into software engineering? And I think because I kind of had imposter syndrome,
sure.
I was self-taught, and there was like the first three people that I hired were all computer science majors from Berkeley. And like very hardcore. Like they had all written operating systems from scratch, right?
Wow.
And I was
Yeah,
like, okay, I need to make you guys successful, because you can code circles around me in your sleep, right? And so I'm like, okay, what can I bring from the restaurant business and from everything else? Um, and your thing about make the team successful was 100% what I was thinking. Um, I've got to remove the friction so that they can be really, really good. And uh, and like that, because they're just way better than I am at coding.
yeah. I think your desire to bring that culture with you is really important in that I'm sure this is the case in other fields. I've been a career software engineer, so I can tell you it's definitely true in software. I think we have this propensity to believe that we're solving problems that haven't been solved elsewhere. And we can look to other organizations and other approaches that have worked in other team dynamics and other, places and directly apply them. Most of the time, they're
Right.
directly applicable.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I tend to think in terms of systems all the time. Like I think of everything as systems,
Yeah.
even if I don't understand it yet. And I think that there's there's always systems that operate effectively, and you can like the way that I think about team leadership. That restaurant experience gave me a chunk of here's the behavior to make it work.
Yeah.
I also spent some time in the car racing world,
Okay.
and so the way that one of the teams that I was with operated, and this is all amateur stuff, right? Nobody's getting paid,
Sure.
but the way that it operated made it really easy for us to be super effective, because the management um, had a really good take on um, task organization and taking care of everybody that was there when we were at the track. So, basically we had to get there and then everything was covered. We didn't have to think of very much. There were schedules, everything was all figured out. When stuff broke, which happens pretty regularly, like everybody knew what they were working on. Um, and then another one of my mentors was in military supply chain,
Okay.
and completely different world, right? But he was the first one that said that his job was to make the team successful. And his perspective was the stuff that was getting moved around that his team was doing. He said there is literally nothing that happens that any individual can do on their own. So if I don't have the team, like everything stops dead,
Yeah.
and we're loading airplanes, and so
Yeah.
we need the whole team to be able to do stuff, and that just stuck, you know. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I totally agree. You can pull stuff from everywhere, um, and it's you can abstract systems into different contexts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. The you're talking about the gregarious introvert.
Yeah.
That's called ambivert.
Oh, okay. There you
That's
go. I
the
learned
that's
something new today.
Yeah. So ambivert is and most people are actually ambivert because they move back and forth between the two, somewhere between the two ends, some way or other.
Sure.
Um, and I totally get the being a cabin in the woods all by yourself thing. 100% get that. That's pretty gives you. Yeah, that's exactly how my head works too. So I totally get it. Yeah. Um, it's good that I feel relieved when other people think like I do. Because
Sure.
every now and then I'm like, am I like way out on the end of the bell curve somewhere? There's two of us on the end of the bell curve now.
Hey, there you
Awesome.
go. There you go. You're
I'm
not
not a
alone.
solo data point. There's at least one other in the world. Thank God. It's such a relief, because every now and then I'm like, wait, other people don't think like this.
Yeah.
What's the bug in my software? But no, okay, we both have the same bug.
There you go.
Uh, are there belief structures or mental models that you have, or that you share with your team to help people be aligned?
Yeah, so alignment is interesting. One of the things that engineers often struggle with, in my experience, is understanding that we get paid for the business to sell products, right? Not for us to build the very best technical solution or, a golly gee whiz bang, whatever, right? The reality is that most software is essentially good enough and sometimes only just that, right? Um, and so what I try to make sure that we understand and so that we're all aligned on is where the business wants us to go and where the business wants us to be. And so really, I make it really clear that I will always decide on priorities if there's any confusion about priorities, right? Because I will say I am a firm believer that priority is a singular term. And
Hmm.
if everything is high priority, then nothing is, right?
Yes.
And so I will always be the person if it's not clear, I will always happily weigh in and tell you which takes precedent, right? But also then as part of that, so for example, here at Prove, we have dedicated product managers. And so it's very clear to my teams that their top priority is making sure that the PM that they're aligned with is happy.
Hmm.
And that's it. That is the top priority. We have the benefit that our PMs report in through our CTO the same way that we do. So we're aligned as an organization. There's a lot
Yep.
of value in that. So they're not pulling us in a different direction that isn't aligned with our own leadership. We all have the same reporting structure. So, we're all essentially getting graded on the same test, right? Um, so that makes that part easier for us. But then it's just very clear that we either are delivering what it is that our PMs have asked for or we're not. And so it's not, well, but Ricardo said, well, I'm not the PM. I've told you very clearly that what the PM wants is the priority, period, full stop. And so the same way we talked about before about pushing back, if I have said something that is in conflict with the PM, you should raise that as a concern, right? And we should get this
Yes.
clarified right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really the key for me is identifying essentially, like I said, what test you're getting graded on. For us, because of our direct alignment with PMs, it makes it easier for me.
Hmm.
In other environments where you don't have that clarity, then you have to take on some of that responsibility yourself, just so that it's very clear again about what the priority is, how we're going to grade that. And this goes all the way down to like the definition of done, right? Because sometimes engineers may say, I slid in and it's code complete, right? But we haven't tested it. We haven't like done our due diligence. We maybe haven't secured it completely, or things like that, right? And so definition of done is also like down to the more tactical level, where
Hmm.
you can
Hmm.
ensure that there's alignment in what it is that's expected of every member of the team along the way. So I guess strategically, it's about the product vision and alignment there. And then tactically, it's about understanding what is expected to see any given issue or task through to completion.
Right. Right. I'm assuming you guys are running some version of Agile.
Everybody is, right? Like nobody, it's a thing that nobody wants to say they're not doing.
Yeah. Or well, if they're not doing it, I want to know what they're doing. Right.
Right.
I'm like, you're not. What are you like? Don't tell me you're doing waterfall, please, because then you'll never be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're building a house, which is a whole different beast.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, okay, yeah, I like that model of what's the product manager need, as long as the product managers are working efficiently and effectively, and doing all the research, and like they should, I always think of the PMs as being kind of the role model
Sure.
for inter-stakeholder communication,
Yep.
um, even more so than anybody in the engineering team. Like really, they need to do it. And anytime, I've had a few product managers tell me that it doesn't scale to go talk to people, and every time I do that, I think you're not going to get adoption on your product.
Yeah.
It's such a like I don't know where, I don't know originally where the first product manager said that,
Sure.
but someone should have like taken them aside and said, "You're missing the point completely." Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I have the good fortune right now to have amazing PMs. And so I think, like you said, communication is just absolutely key to that role. It is really almost the entirety of the value that they bring, because they're basically, translating what the business needs. And different organizations, they might align directly with sales or they might align, somewhere else. But they're translating that to engineers and vice versa, right? Because there are
Right.
constraints that we have to communicate back. Sometimes those are timelines, sometimes it's technical feasibility. Oftentimes it's really a question of expense, right? Like I often joke that we can do anything you want, but it might cost you a lot.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Um,
What's
and
the
so
budget?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so the PMs are the ones that are conveying that message back and forth, and not just the message, right? So it's not, they're not playing a game of telephone. They actually need to have the ability to articulate back to both sides in language that each side understands so that
Mhm.
they can have that conversation.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a critical element. And I'm not sure they always get the level of support and um like I got thrown into product management um as I was being hired for a software role,
Sure.
and they said, well, you've already been building the kind of stuff that we need you to do some more stuff. We're going to give you a product manager who knows nothing about the industry. And I was like, what are they going to do, you know?
Sure.
um and they said, well, you can ask them, for like how to template stuff, when you're writing spec documents or whatever. And I was like, okay. um but it was great for me because it forced me to go do all that research and figure out that language stuff. And I don't know if it was good or bad, but I got to write the spec for what I then built.
Yeah.
You
I,
know,
I like to say that software is not a solved problem. And I think that if I were to zoom out a little bit, I think software, the industry is not a solved problem, right? Is that
right,
we're all learning from different companies. Some of that gets to translate, some of it doesn't. And so you'll find in different roles that there's varying levels of support and education for onboarding. And just like PMs, a lot of times managers are thrust in there like, oh, you were the top IC on the team. You'll be great as a manager. And here's no training, right? So like,
right.
and so obviously down that way, there are success stories, but there's plenty of failure as well. And
Yep.
same thing with PMs. And now all the rage is like forward deployed engineers, right? Which I think mostly gets attributed to Palantir. And so like, that's kind of a hybrid role. And so there's again varying levels of support for people onboarding into that space. But again, PMs, solutions engineers or architects, right? A lot of these folks kind of get thrown into the deep end because they were a software engineer. They'll figure it out.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I was lucky because I did figure it out. Um,
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say luck. I do believe, in the adage, you make your own luck. I think, like you
mhm.
said, is that you went and did the research and you put in the time. And I think that most people that are successful end up doing that. Again, in any walk of life, even the walk of life they thought they knew. So, like the folks that you hired out of Berkeley, right? There's a vast difference between a CS degree and a software engineering role. Um,
Right, right,
and so that still is incumbent upon them to be lifelong learners like all the rest of us to really own the responsibilities of that role.
right, right. Yeah, no, I totally, yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, Systems for you talked about, engineers getting thrust into the leadership role. And
Sure.
um, do you have any systems for training up people and testing them um, before you give them the title?
I don't. And so this is maybe a personal failing because it's come up before. I really think that the individual is kind of paramount. And what I mean by that is that people tend to rise to their own level regardless. It doesn't matter. Like I said before, that I was a natural leader. And so what that means to me is that without necessarily seeking it out, I continue to find myself in different leadership roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so um, and so that is just one example. You'll find that like your brightest technical stars will always find a way to shine technically, right?
Right,
You'll
right.
find that like your best salespeople will always find a way to close a deal, right? Um, you know, and so the people that will shine as people managers will be the folks that are already gravitating towards leadership, they're already tending to take on responsibilities that are outside of what a normal IC would do. And so it's kind of like a self-selection process. Now, the downside to that is that there are probably tons of people that never self-select that could be amazing at it, right? Um, and so I don't want to sound like I do not intend to imply that what I'm saying is a great way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
What I've done is essentially organically allowed folks to, to move into those kinds of roles.
Okay, cool. You and I think very differently about this thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I think leaders, like I think everybody's built. It's just that some people like you, somewhere early on, started doing things like, marching to your own beat, right? That helped you learn things that made you an easy choice for the powers that be to say, we're going to give this to Ricardo because he figures things out and he's personally responsible. And so we think he can do this. And by the way, we're going to assign him 3 people to help him get the job done, right? And so for me, I look at the systematic leadership and I'm thinking in terms of the very tactical level of team lead,
sure.
because years ago, one of the founders I worked for said, "Oh," and I was leading a software team, and he told me that I had more leverage to help my team operate better than he did because I was with them every day, and he's abstracted away, and he's like, my job is to make you successful in making them better, and so whatever you need, let me know. And so, thinking through, okay, how do I help these people be successful? Number one, I came up with a different set of mental models, beliefs, like beliefs about leadership.
Sure.
And like some of those you're saying, but what I've noticed is that not everybody has that same belief structure.
Sure.
The second part of it was recognizing that part of doing leadership well is emotionally uncomfortable.
Sure.
And leaning into that and being like, okay, it's scary and my team needs help and I got to go figure out how to make this happen. Right.
Yeah.
And figuring out a bunch of skills around that. You got into sales and I'm sure you learned a bunch of communication stuff in that because sales is all about communication, right?
Yep.
I went looking for skills around research,
Sure.
1, and then presentation, number 2. A bunch of which I learned by reading books on sales. So,
Sure. Yeah.
I'm like, because those guys know how to do it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the next thing was because I had those stacks, it changed the power dynamics for me.
Sure.
Because
Absolutely.
all of a sudden I'm comfortable talking to other people in the company, peers, and then all of a sudden I'm comfortable talking to my boss's boss, right? And then suddenly I'm pitching the C-suite,
Yep. Absolutely.
and once you do that, all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's stuff that I know that they don't know. And so I'm actually helping them be more successful. And that completely changes the whole power dynamic.
Sure.
And then I just make everything habits, right? So for
Yep.
me, for like when we train people, that stack that we do, there's 2 reasons for it. One, it's everybody consistently has the same operating methodology,
Sure.
principle set.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is that I want to give people who, as you said, could be great leaders, but they don't, they're not self-selecting, to
Yep.
give them a playbook and let them learn it and then start experimenting.
Yep.
so that they're safe. And it's I totally stole this model from the U.S. military, by the way. I freely admit it, is
Yeah.
because that's how they operate, right? They train you. You got to prove that you're competent, and then you get the promotion.
Yep.
They don't promote you and then say figure it out, right?
Right.
Like, even though in the software world we do that, and every time that happens, I like inside I cringe,
Yep.
um, because it's the military, they don't do that, and I
No.
think it's expensive. I think what we do has a very high cost, because I think the failure rate's higher than the success rate is.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of truth to that. I think you know, hiring the wrong leader is much more detrimental than hiring the wrong IC. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not unlike in the NFL when you draft the wrong quarterback. It takes you
Right.
it could take you years to recover. Um, and so there is definitely something to be said for that. I think I'd like to think that as an industry we're getting smarter about that, and that we're not following the old apocryphal story of just like you're the top IC, so let's make you the manager now. Um, you know, I'm sure it still happens. But overall, I'd say that it's been pretty infrequent in my career that I've seen that direct pipeline, right? Is that it is usually somebody who was given at least a bare understanding of what would be expected of them. Um,
Right. Right.
again, to greater or lesser degree, depending on the organization, and then support, like we talked about before with the PMs, in terms of actually learning the ropes of actually doing the actual job. Um, but I think we've mostly gotten away. At least I hope we've mostly gotten away from just thrusting somebody into that.
Yeah, it's uh, I'm hoping there's more people like us that are, like, helping people understand how to structure that, right, in
Yeah,
a consistent, repeatable process.
absolutely.
Um, and
I do think the self-selecting thing though is super important for me, and
yep.
the reason why I really focus on that is that you have to want it, and that's the
Right.
case in any field, right? Leadership is not unique in that regard. Um, and I also mentioned before about being a lifelong learner, like you want to devote yourself to that pursuit, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
there are books that you're probably going to want to read. It may not be the same books that I would pick or that you would pick, but like somebody's going to want to pick up some books and understand some things. I say books, maybe YouTube videos, whatever, whatever it is that like encourages you to learn more about being better at the thing.
Right. Right.
Super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Eh,
I'm always looking for new education perspectives, angles, you know, and I think that growth mindset that you're talking about is really, we all have blind spots, and
Yep.
that growth mindset is kind of us shining a flashlight around the darkness to try and figure out what's the next piece I need to learn that I can wrap my head around, and get the next increment. I'm really good in this area, but I'm really not very good over here. What
Yep.
can I learn to get up to be more level? Yeah.
Absolutely. I just shared with someone today that sincere feedback is one of the rarest, most valuable gifts that we can receive. Um, and it may not always feel that way at the time,
Right. Right.
and especially when it's critical. Um, but if you can take some time, go back, internalize what it was, understand that the messenger was hopefully acting with the best of intent,
Right. Right.
and then actually think and reflect not just on the feedback, but your reaction to the feedback, right? Is that it might have touched a nerve on something that you need to work on more broadly.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're totally right. Have you read? So, do you know who Jeff Hancher is?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. Um, Hang on. Let me go find this book.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there it is. Confirm feedback in a fragile world.
All right. I'll have to
Yeah.
look into that.
Yeah. So Jeff Hancher, it just came out this year. It's new.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point about feedback, that's the book's all about that. And I don't recall, like, that's very niche, right? And I don't recall seeing any book previously about that.
Yeah.
And so I was really happy to get that. He also guested on the podcast back when the book launched.
Awesome.
And I liked both the diversity of the experience that he had.
Yeah.
He started off driving a laundry delivery truck,
Okay.
and that, and then got promoted into leadership, and did a bunch of stuff,
Sure.
different verticals where he could experiment and practice.
Yeah.
But he has a very thoughtful way of approaching it, which I really liked. And yeah, be on the receiving side, it can be tough. You got to figure out, how do you take it and operationalize it,
Well, also earlier you talked about like sometimes being a leader can be emotionally difficult.
Oh yeah.
Giving good feedback can also be very difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I tend to think of feedback through the lens. You said quarterback a minute ago.
Yeah.
I think of it through the lens of sports coaching.
Sure.
And what are the very very behavioral, very detailed kind of tweaks to make in, and figuring out the level someone's at and the next level they can achieve, being very incremental in that.
Yeah.
Rather than, this is where you're at and we want you to go to here, which is, there's 52 steps in the middle, and I can't, and so being able to go like, oh yeah, you need this next piece, right? And then, little baby steps. And that's, yeah, I always think about it that way of like, how do we get that? And it doesn't always work, that's.
Well, people are squishy, right? And so
Right.
like that's kind of the thing is that systems are fantastic and it's always good to have a system to refer back to. But all systems, when they are faced with reality, you have to kind of adapt to the situation, right? And
Yeah.
you can have the same conversation with 15 different direct reports and get 30 different responses, right?
Yeah.
And so, the real trick in providing feedback is, like most things that are narrative based, is understanding your audience.
Right.
And that's not always easy to do because not everybody shares their true self at work. And so like sometimes it's difficult to read how somebody's really going to respond. But yeah, I absolutely, feedback is super important. I think the coaching analogy is a great one because this was something that they talked about at Netflix is, we're not a family, right? A family has unconditional love, right? We are a sports team, is you get paid for performance. And so part of my performance as a leader is me providing feedback on your performance, right? Is that I need you to be the best, whatever that you can be. And your point, I'm not looking at some future state, right? Like I'm not trying to turn you into, the next, I don't know, Linus Torvalds, right? Like,
yeah,
I just need you to be a better version of yourself tomorrow, and then the next day after that, right? And when I say better version of yourself, scoping it to professional, right? There is a whole person there too. So, understanding people who come through different seasons themselves. But really, again, we're a sports team. So I will give you all the time that you need to take care of your personal, but at work, I'm providing you feedback on a professional level.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great it's a great support structure and system. And it totally makes sense. and I just had this thought in the back of my head. The real question is, how many people know who Linus Torvalds is?
Fair enough.
You know, but
Fair enough.
we all have gray hair. I think maybe you don't. I don't know. I have gray hair.
I do. I do. If it grew in, it would be.
But I think, it's one of those, it's almost like it's a reference that you can check how deep people's knowledge is,
Sure. Yep.
What is he doing these days?
Oh, he's still the benevolent dictator for life for Linux.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
so I think I think he technically works now directly for the Linux Foundation.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Awesome. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, he found his purpose in life.
He did.
And he's got that road to go run. And yeah, that's good. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always curious, like when I don't hear about people for a while, I'm like, what are they doing?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
He could be retired semi kind of,
He's not. There was a heated conversation recently about what happens after Linus for Linux, and so, but no decisions were made. But it was a big deal.
He's going to need someone to hand it off to, like Jobs did to Cook,
Yep.
Like
so like somebody
yeah.
or someone's, I guess, right? It could be a committee or something like that, which has its trade-offs.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely pros and cons on that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I'm trying to think. Okay. We've gone all around all these different questions. This is really good. Is there any question that I should have asked you that I didn't think of? Is like anything you're like, oh my God, why didn't he ask about, I don't know, whatever. If I knew what it was, I would have asked you, but
yeah, no, I mean, I think most people's paths to leadership are personal. There are definitely going to be, some repeats, or it's like the phrase that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, right? So you'll find stories that rhyme, right? I'm definitely not going to be the first or last leader that you've spoken to that considers himself a natural leader. And similarly, you're going to talk to a bunch that are self-made leaders, right? Like they decided they wanted to pursue that. Or the military example is a great one. The military's forged a ton of great leaders.
Yep.
And so you're going to hear those kinds of stories again and again. So I think really the key to understand, like for anybody that is listening, is that your path to leadership is going to be yours. Always understand that it's okay that it doesn't look just like mine or like Bill's. And guess what? Our stories aren't done yet either, right? So we're continuing to write those.
Right. Yeah, it's always an evolution. Yeah. This has been super cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
Very cool.